Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Monday, December 11th. So, let's just hop in here today. I am surrounded by a certain sense of urgency and frankly, a miasma of defeat is closing in on me. Certainly, in that I basically have until Friday to finish a prototype version at least of my smart on-air sign, and yeah, I don't think I'm gonna make it. I have the help in HTML, I think perfect now, as good as it's gonna get, although frankly every single time I load up the setup menu and look at the help, I could go through it again and just double check to make sure all the capitalization and spelling and just keep on trying that, and I might find something new every single time. That's basically how it's been going. As far as the HTML placement and the CSS, I've got it as good as I think I'm gonna get it. There's some weirdness there that I had to work around, and as far as I know, I'm probably just working it around for Android phones, and it may look completely different on non-Android phones, and frankly it might look completely different on just different models of Android phones even, but it looks good on my phone, and I'm just hoping that it looks good enough on all the other phones. Apparently we've got some kind of timed warning here. Let's open these instead. These are from the Duelist Cup, and I guess I just didn't open them in the last stream. So I was going down the path of trying to figure out how to encrypt the flash, which there's two things you want to do in a finalized product: is encrypt the flash and enable secure boot on an ESP32 secure boot version 2. And to do any of that is to step away from using the Arduino IDE, which in all honesty I guess I should just completely wean myself off of using the Arduino IDE anyways, and using the ESP IDF instead, because it's just like, it's basically the same programs but slightly different because of different versions, and it's much more text-based. It is much closer to the experience. The ESP IDF is much closer to the experience of trying to build something in Linux versus installing Ubuntu and going to the graphical desktop graphical package manager and installing an app as, I guess, a Flatpak is what you would be installing apps as now on Ubuntu, which that process has been made very user-friendly when you're installing something like that, whereas a bare metal text-based, you're just having to install all the dependencies and libraries yourself situation of a less user-friendly Linux can be an incredible nightmare. In fact, it's pretty much the exact same procedure. It's using CMake to compile a C program, and so I'm having to basically figure out how to get the libraries, which thank goodness I only used a few, to work with this different version of the programs with the ESP IDF, which is a newer version, which is good theoretically, but yeah, it's basically starting all over again, and it's a frustrating process to say the least. And it's done in a slightly different way than I think I've ever done it before. So I've hit this wall of I'm just gonna have to keep on trying and working on it and struggling with it. Some of the code I've written I think is gonna straight up have to be slightly changed just because Arduino IDE was helping the code work when in a more pure form of a different compiler it won't work. A lot of it has to do with paths. A lot of it has to do with where is the library situated, which version of the library is the Arduino IDE choosing, what predefined pin numbers and things are being labeled by the board manager through a hardware abstraction layer. Basically, Arduino is designed to be an easy programming IDE for little kids at some level. There definitely is that wide element of it where they do want little kids to program on these microcontrollers and do simplistic things. That's why their basic first program is just a blink an LED hello world style of program. Instead of something more complicated. And frankly, the microcontrollers themselves are designed in such a way that they really can't be that... I think I've already lost, come to think of it. They really can't be that complicated of programs, because you're not programming a program to run on a computer, you're programming a program to run on a microcontroller. So it could do something really fast, and it could do something really good and not reboot and crash randomly like Windows will as much, but at the core of it, it is not going to like rip a Blu-ray disc into an MP4 file, or it's not going to record a video and stream it to YouTube. It's going to see if a pin is high, if you've opened a circuit, if there's a vibration sensor going on, something like that. Something very simplistic. In fact, it's probably pushing the limits of an ESP32 to even do what I'm having it do, in that it can be a smart device, and like most smart devices, it really can only do a few things. There's not quite enough room with it. The thing that I find most irritating about this whole process, though, about having to use the ESP IDF, is that it's just not really separated out as much as I would like it to be, or at least I don't think it is. And even if it was, it kind of doesn't matter if it was separated out. And by separated out, I mean the process of encrypting the flash and the bootloader and all of that all seem to be under the exact same build command. You just type in flash and it should just do everything. If it's gonna work, it will work. There probably is a way to separate out some of that, but not by much. Because it would have been super nice, and I needed to only install the IDF, and then said type in the word encrypt, and then it would have encrypted what was already there by the Arduino, and just said, okay, we've got it, we're good. But no, it doesn't seem like it really wants to work that way. It really seems like it wants to build it. Alright. This is going to be where we determine whether or not we've got success here, or if we've got failure here. Ideally, what I would like to see happen, and I did go down this route and see if I could convince anybody to go in this direction, would be for Arduino to just support encryption and in itself, which would mean it would have to call the functions to burn the E-fuses. I was actually wrong, and the way I thought it should work is actually the way it will work. While you can burn pre-made encryption keys, there's not really a reason to. In fact, it's much smarter to not burn encryption keys, because it will just generate its own on the next boot anyways, and then use that to encrypt the program. So my understanding obviously was lackluster, and it's still very lackluster, but there's a couple of keys, and I was confused here. The secure bootloader is going to be encrypted with a public key, and any program you try to write to it, as far as an application level program, will have to be encrypted with the private key. And then the bootloader will unencrypt the application with the public key, put it onto its flash memory, and in the process of putting it onto its flash memory, it's going to then encrypt it with the second key, which, if you just leave that field blank and don't burn the E-fuses, will just be a random number. Random to every single chip. So if I make 100 smart on air signs, there would be then 100 different variations, effectively, of that data written as the application goes. It also means that if somebody desoldered the flash memory off of one chip and put it on another, it still wouldn't work. So all that means then is I have to keep the private key, and this is the exact same thing as PGP and OpenSSL encryption technology. It's all the same code. But yeah, I just have to keep the private key safe, and in that I believe you can actually have 3 private keys, and I think there's some way to actually revoke one of the public keys that pairs with one of the 3 private keys if one of the private keys got found, leaked out. And so in theory it all sounds good. In practice I haven't gotten anywhere close to that, although I did get close enough to make the one mistake that, as I was reading the instructions, which I can only account this to stupidity, like the one thing they said to not do was, once you have encryption enabled, don't flash a plain text application to it, or you will soft brick the device, and then you'll have to burn an E-fuse, which means at that point you can probably never use it for encryption again. So I have 3 of these chips, potentially one of these chips now can't be really used in a final product. Not a big deal, but boy was it dumb to do that, because it told me over and over again, don't do this, and in some point my mind was just not paying enough attention, and it did it. The problem is, this whole process is just incredibly repetitive. It's just like let's do this again, let's do this again, let's try it a little bit different here. And I only made it that far because I just installed a very simplistic program to the chip. So I have never gotten to the point where I've gotten encryption working with my program, but I have gotten to the point where I've gotten encryption working with their sample program. And I did verify, at the very least, that it is encrypted. Although you also want to effectively erase the flash, unless it's the first time you've flashed that device. Otherwise, it will really only encrypt the new data it's written to it, and so there will be spots in the memory that will have the old data still visible. All of this inherently begs that I'll have to probably get a Raspberry Pi 5 at some point just for processing power reasons, and use that as a way of flashing 4 chips at once through just USB. Could be 3 chips at once, could be more. It's either that or get some kind of Linux computer of some other sort, a laptop or something, and just have it be a dedicated thing, because I definitely want to, in a production level, get this to the point where multiple devices are getting flashed from one device and it's running on Linux just for some convenience reasons. But yeah, it does not feel like I'm gonna get done by Friday, not unless I get really lucky, and a big part of that is also just gonna have to be a matter of being awake, which definitely I'm not succeeding at that either. Like, that is a big problem too. So yeah, I wish I had better news to talk about, and well, I said I was going to stop calling this the accountability section. But yeah, over the weekend, that's what I've been working on, and it's been very much a learning journey more than a successful journey. Although I did have minor successes in that A, I have learned some things, and B, I did actually manage to fix the help files and all of that. I also wasted some time, potentially, in programming it, in that I added another feature. I believe I didn't mention this, haven't mentioned this yet, but in the last stream I said I programmed a pin to just be the opposite, so it would be low when the regular wire is high. That way, if it was a situation where for some reason the LEDs should come on a 0 ground level, 0 volts instead of 5 volts, that could happen. Or if you wanted to connect it to a like a electric door lock, you could potentially do that with normally open, normally closed technology. I decided, since eventually there will be probably a second version of this device designed to be more DIY, I might as well open up the possibility that this first version of the device might want to connect to addressable LEDs, maybe not individually addressable LEDs, but addressable LEDs of some sort. So It honestly wasn't that much work to put in some extra code and dedicate a couple more pins, which there's still plenty. I could easily think, if I could think of something to do with 3 or 4 more pins, I could probably wire something to those too, but I think this is good. So I took some time to make some work that really would only pay off in 2 scenarios. One is it's work that will already be done for a 2nd generation do-it-yourself version of the device, and it will give me a backup if at some point I would need to buy, in particular, NeoPixels. There's many different types of LED strips, but NeoPixels are going to be really expensive compared to LEDs that are not addressable. They probably will be guaranteed to find. So if there was just a scenario where I could not get the on-air signs, the pre-made on-air signs, the plastic, the LEDs there, I could temporarily or quickly buy NeoPixels and replace the LEDs with those, although I'd still need a box somewhere, which that's where you get to the idea of potentially 3D printing or laser cutting out of acrylic your own box to turn into a smart on-air sign, which I'm calling that my 3rd generation device. So the idea is to sell a final product as a first step, and theoretically I wanted to do that starting January 1st, and that's highly unlikely to happen, or at least doing a crowd supply of whatever crowd supply really would look like, which I haven't put any work into that, and shouldn't put any work into it until I really have a final product. I question if I really at this point even need testers to test out the product, but I mean, it definitely makes sense to do it. And then I was thinking, if there was some scenarios where instead of it saying on air, there might be some other things that if I had a laser cutter, it would make sense to use. And in session might make sense for a psychiatrist, but inherently the thing there is there's probably devices that already exist that would be better. But I could see in session making sense, and I could see people wanting custom things. I could even see potentially having individually addressable LEDs and then having a cutout in such a way that it lit up half of it when it was when it was one person on air or busy, making a room busy, wanting privacy, wanting not to be interrupted. That's pretty much where the sign, I think, mostly works. Gaming would be another word that potentially I could see laser cutouts happening there. As far as the addressable LEDs, there's only really enough room on it for 8,000 LEDs, but if my programming works at all, because I didn't test any of it, it seems like it can do on and off on that pretty fast. I'm not going to do a 30 to 60 frames per second animation there, but just turning them all to white, turning them all off to black, that seems to be doable. And I picked 8,000 because I couldn't go any higher to a power of 2. And I picked that much because I definitely have suffered with other smart devices that are LED controllers that have limited numbers programmed into it for no reason. And so if you try to plug in any longer strands or add any LEDs, it just doesn't work. And there's just not any reason in this one scenario to do that. In fact, almost all patterns have no reason to not go as high as possible, as much memory as you can contain to make different patterns. I did not prepare well as far as having water today. I may have to take a break just to get water. The way the addressable LEDs work is there's like a theoretical maximum number, but then they just take the biggest number they see and then move it down. So it is a signal that says you're number 100, take your ticket, and then hand it to the next person, and then the next person will receive a signal that says you're number 99, take your ticket, take your color, and hand it to the next person. And so it's really a case where you can overshoot the numbers on an LED strip in the programming, as far as I understand it, by thousands and thousands, and it just doesn't matter because the last chip will just the last LED in a strand will say, okay, I'm number 4,000, I'll take my color and hand the rest down the line, and there's just not anybody else down the line. I wish I had more to talk about other than the smart on-air sign, but I really don't. I've been kind of slow to get back to that Scooby-Doo-like cartoon from DreamWorks called The Fright Crew on Hulu, which I did watch one more episode of that, and yeah, it is a Scooby-Doo-like kids cartoon set in New Orleans with more voodoo inspired and magic, and so far so good for what I've seen, but it is very much kid friendly. It's definitely better than my continued journey down wasting time watching Ghost Whisperer, which has locked itself fully at this point into being around the concept of a city built on top of another city, and this underground city being full of ghosts, and that all resolving in this season, I think, to a big battle, which Medium never really did too much of that. There definitely was one season in the middle of its 5 or 6 seasons where thematically it was all somewhat connected, and there were a couple episodes where there was a bad guy, but the bad guy in Medium always was a ghost, so there was this weirdness around how you're going to defeat a ghost when the ghosts are effectively immortal. But yeah, other than that, most Medium episodes can be watched out of order and they work pretty well. Maybe not 100% well, but pretty good. And most, I'd say at least the majority of Medium episodes are actually worth watching and paying attention to, where Ghost Whisperer is nowhere close to that. Almost none of the episodes I've seen are actually worth watching. it definitely feels like Ghost Whisperer was literally just trying to rip off Medium. Either that or Medium did an extremely good job of ripping off Ghost Whisperer. Well, we're gonna lose here, so we might as well activate this ability. I guess my only other thought would have been to send this to the graveyard. But yeah, I don't think I even have watched that much TV. There's this weird Amazon Prime movie called Silver that was half spoken in English. Actually, I'd say about a third of it is English and then 2/3 of it is in German. And I thought it was going to be a TV series about these teenagers who could jump into the dreams of people. But nope, it was a movie, 90-minute movie. Nice set dressing and its Hall of Doors gimmick, but that's pretty much all I could say about it, is that the dream sequences were well shot. I'm not sure I've watched anything else on Amazon Prime. I wish there was more content on Amazon Prime in particular. Yeah. I really wish there was something that brought about more interesting, newer content from around the world like Netflix does. But also right now, certainly is the worst time to really take time off and watch TV. And if we were going to go through wishes, I wish I knew somebody who could program with me, for me. Not the best programmer in the world by any means, and I'm not the fastest, and I'm not the best formatter of code, if that really matters, to make it look good, to spell things right, to make it all in the right cases and everything like that. But really just having somebody to bounce the ideas off of would be greatly appreciated by me in a lot of cases, a lot of scenarios. It's, if you have something that you're passionate or something that you're working on, it's always nice to potentially find somebody that shares your passion and they can speak on similar levels. But sadly, it is the case that most people in most scenarios are responded with a vast amount of disinterest in whatever they're passionate about, whatever they're talking about, whatever they're thinking about. Well, these streams are definitely changed at this point, so they don't have to be particularly that long, and that there isn't an inherent need other than to get the daily quest done to play for a full hour. So I think I want to go ahead and just jump into the news 30 minutes in. I'm still incredibly confused as to the way this Lego Fortnite is. I thought it was going to be its own separate game, but according to Video Games Chronicle, Epic says that Fortnite's new Lego racing and festival modes are here to stay. The company added 3 new live service experiences to Fortnite this month, so it's all in this metaverse, for lack of a better term, that's probably the wrong word. This may be the first successful idea of potentially having a metaverse. But it's all inside of Fortnite. And one of the things that has occurred to me is that there was this controversy where people were finding that some of their guns and skins and knives and things like that, whatever the skins were being labeled as not being playable on certain servers for 18 plus. I think this might be the other hand of this, is that they were working to this idea that they want to make a version of Fortnite very kid friendly, and they don't want to get taken down in any countries. So they're creating this idea here that kids who play Fortnite will at some point in some countries be forced to play the Lego Fortnite version and the kid friendly, less violent, less bloody, less gory version of Fortnite. And then the adults, or the teenagers, let's be honest, of Fortnite will be playing the realistic skins in Fortnite, and they with the blood and the gore and the realistic gun skins. Yet they want to keep it all in the same world, all in the same V-Bucks, I assume. And that's where I suspect this is gonna go. And it may be a slow process before we get to a point where kids are somehow identified and locked into kids' accounts, and there's going to be some kind of age verification, because there definitely seems like globally a growing push to demand some sort of system, even though nobody knows what that system would be, to verify the ages of players. And I don't know if I really want to give any ideas here, but I am okay with age appropriateness, but it is definitely a level of censorship. But then you really can't make a legitimate argument in my mind to say that censorship amongst kids should be completely eliminated. There should be some age appropriateness happening there. Like, I can't make the argument that, like, the novel Lolita should be handed to a 6-year-old to read. Not that they would probably even be able to read it, but yeah, I think that would be age inappropriate. Now, if you want to give it to a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old, heck, even a 14-year-old, that there might be something to that. In fact, I could see it being a helpful tool in teaching kids about sexual predators and people obsessing and unreliable narrators. I could imagine, and see that you really wouldn't want this to happen, but I could imagine libraries in the United States becoming one of several stations where you could go and verify an age to a librarian, and then they could give you some kind of code that would verify your age to some kind of website service that interconnected to all games in some kind of website. But inherently, that is the government agency, even if it's just a librarian. And you basically would need fingerprint readers, which even now fingerprint readers are not doing a great job in securing computers just to log in. But yeah, you would basically have to have people buying fingerprint readers and putting them on their computers, their consoles, or logging in through fingerprint readers that are kind of in most cell phones, most expensive cell phones. But yeah, you'd have to have somebody verify that the person is over 18 or their birth date, and then take their fingerprint. And yeah, I'm not sure that's the kind of information you really want on the internet. And it certainly can be argued that having laws around the world requiring ages verifications goes against a parent's rights or a parent's ability to decide what their kid can or can't play. Yeah, but I am utterly still confused as far as Lego Fortnite as to being a connected game. I really thought it was just going to be a completely separate game that is just a double dipping and a selling of the same game twice. Although I'm going to have that exact same confusion again today in just a few minutes when we get to that story. Meanwhile, Minecraft decided to make it clippy, which I guess it took them long enough to make this joke, and I guess that indicates that Microsoft is not so sore about Clippy being a huge failure and being the butt of all jokes, that they would have stopped Mojang from doing this. Although, yeah, wouldn't be surprised if a significant number of people who work on Clippy don't even work at Microsoft anymore. But then you also run into the problem in that scenario where kids who are playing Minecraft probably don't know who Clippy is. This might be a soft testing of the waters on behalf of Microsoft to see if they could bring back Clippy, because, you know, they already kind of blew it with Cortana, and so it would kind of make some sense to try a different mascot next time they try to make a assistant character or a smart AI character. Like, almost certainly Microsoft is going to want some artificial intelligence long program, and so having a visual component there, some avatar like Clippy, might make a lot of sense. To bring back Clippy and make him be the mascot of AI. Well, we'll go ahead and do this anyways, just to activate its ability. He didn't understand what the cards were going to do there, so he wasted cards. I wanted to point out this GameDeveloper.com article, not particularly for the article itself. Starbreeze Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is getting a remake, we already knew that, but this is a screenshot of what the well, honestly, this probably isn't a screenshot at all. This is probably more concept art or still image art from the original Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, but the difference here in the hair technology and the appearance of the two brothers is fairly different. I wish there was a comparison. Let's see if we can see something here. Yeah, but the graphics didn't really have to be great anyways for the game, because you were fairly far away from the characters anyway in that case. But yeah, you can see this is about as far as you would see them normally in the game, but in the cutscenes things look a lot better visually. The big problem here, though, is this is at best going to be a scenario where they create a few more gimmicks. Like, it's going to be a few more gimmicks where you're controlling two brothers at the same time. It's just not going to be a great expansion on the concept or full sequel. Maybe they plan on making a sequel after making the sequel. But I kind of question that idea too, as far as I don't know if I can stomach the idea of there being a renaissance where we see many small indie games that really would have been Xbox 360 arcade games, where we had that large amount of small indie games catching everybody's attention, or catching at least my attention. Like, I don't want to. I don't think I can really stomach the idea of seeing a bunch of those getting remade, and then potentially after that point getting sequels. Like, if you told me you were going to remake Limbo, for instance, which is a game that's perfectly playable at this point, and my Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is also perfectly playable at this point, I don't think I could really stomach that. And if you told me then, after you remade Limbo, that you're going to make a sequel, which I'm only speculating on that part, which definitely, in the case of Brothers, here's the original art again, just way more soft cell CGI animation style. I don't think I could stomach that idea. In the same way, if we're going to baselessly speculate about what might happen, I don't know if I could really stomach the idea of live action remakes. And Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons full motion video would be somewhat doable. I could see potentially getting some celebrities or some stunt people and having them green screened into a world, and then the background and the rest of the world potentially still be animating. And more realistically, they probably wouldn't do full motion video and remake games that way. If they were going to do anything like that, they'd do it for games like Myst and pretty much nothing else, games that had full motion video originally. But we're going to hit a point fairly quickly particularly with small, easy games, where even the remake that they're promising now of Brothers A Tale of Two Sons could easily be surpassed with Unreal Engine 5 and hyper-realistic graphics to look like real humans, and just be hyper-realistic, which really wouldn't even suit Brothers A Tale of Two Sons, which is more of a fantasy world. The bigger question, I guess, would be is the maker of Brothers A Tale of Two Sons even done anything else? Like, as I'm kind of skimming this, they're talking about, I assume the maker is this Josef Fares, in 2013. But he maybe is at Starbreeze Studios, and he's not involved with the remake at all. So, yeah. And then they're also pointing out Brothers would seem to fit the mold by earlier. It continues here. The existence of Brothers Remake comes almost a full month after 505 owner Digital Bros announced they'd be laying off some of its staff. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is another case of them shoveling out a game before shuttering or significantly downsizing. Which, yeah, there's a real problem here as far as the game universe, the game industry, in that it is effectively broken itself, much like the Hollywood industry, and much like the Hollywood industry, that doesn't mean it's going to go away, but it may very quickly become far too similar to the situation where there's fewer and fewer games being made, and the amount of budget put into games is higher and higher, and the expectations for profit is higher and higher, and then the disappointment when it doesn't profit is higher and higher. The idea of small indie games like Brothers A Tale of Two Sons probably has already passed us by now, and I imagine, well, and I have to imagine we haven't really seen another game like Brothers since 2013, 10 years ago. And honestly, I guess, if I look back on my entire career, assuming I've been running my YouTube channel for 10 years, which is a rough estimate of how long I've been doing, best not to count the days, there really haven't been that many great video games that have come out. There's all been a lot of controversy too around everything. There's So I said I was going to be confused again about why a game is coming out, or how a game is coming out, and this is the other game I was talking about from Gamatsu. Shadowverse Beyond Worlds Beyond has been announced for PC, iOS, and Android. Now, Shadowverse was the collectible card game that I was playing before playing Yu-Gi-Oh! After I was unfairly banned for a few days on Magic the Gathering Arena, and in general just was not really enjoying dealing with Wizards of the Coast of Magic the Gathering Arena. So the weirdness here, though, is how can you and why would you make a new collectible card game when you could just continue your old collectible card game. Although in all fairness, I guess Shadowverse is definitely old enough that you could take the perspective that it is just a game that is not really that accessible. For new players, and it did have this weird visual novel solo mode story element to it, so maybe they're gonna try and drop that or reboot that. Maybe they're just trying to reboot the whole game in total. Shadowverse was always a weird one in that it definitely had the anime waifu art style to it, although I would say this lady seems to be showing a little bit more skin than they really were showing on Shadowverse. But then it really didn't do much with that, and its cards were kind of all over the place. Nowhere is all over the place as Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is all over several different multiverses, but there was, I think, about 8 heroes with 8 different hero classes, and it's fairly tough to balance. But I suppose that's the one thing I haven't really considered here, is that Shadowverse Worlds Beyond may continue the story, but drastically change how the gameplay plays, in that you could, I think, only play certain cards with certain heroes and certain decks. And each hero had an ability, where Yu-Gi-Oh! Being a much older game does not have that. Hearthstone had that aspect, certainly. There was specific cards to every hero class in Hearthstone, and there was only certain things you could do. There were hero abilities. Probably played this wrong. Yeah, I did. I could have played better though. So, Cygames has announced a free-to-play digital card game called Shadowverse Worlds Beyond for PC, iOS, and Android. It is worth pointing out, though, that Shadowverse also tried to make a spin-off, more kid-friendly version of the game and put that on the Switch. And they tried to make a Shadowverse anime, which I don't think went anywhere. Maybe went one season in the anime. Had no connection to the heroes of the original Shadowverse game, and instead had very much kid-friendly anime kids. More like Digimon would be, I guess, the closest thing. Looking here, it seems to me like they're using the same cards, because this was the card style in Shadowverse. I'm not saying anything different. Shadowverse definitely was a digital first, digital only experience, and so they could move the numbers that are important to the attack and defense and the mana cost to the edges, and have an almost full screen image of the character, and they can cut out the card to be that unique size. Although you could make real world cards that look this way. You just have some plastic see-through elements on the edge, or you just cut things. I mean, theoretically, yeah, you could definitely cut cards this way. It looks to me like it's still the 8 character classes that you can, heroes and classes: Forestcraft, Swordcraft, Runecraft, Dragoncraft, Abysscraft, Havencraft, Portalcraft, and Neutral. Neutral might be new there. Um, and so you're saying Abysscraft is new, but there definitely was something, because there was a vampire character and there was a little anime girl that could see ghosts in the first Shadowverse game. I guess maybe they're changing those two characters. I suspect it's all going to be new characters too. Part of the problem with the visual novel story of Shadowverse is that it went on forever and it felt like it was trying to wrap up, but it also went fairly crazy. So yeah, this is a Portalcraft character who is not the Portalcraft character, which was a guy in the first game. This is a different Forestcraft character. It looks like the game is going to be set in some kind of overworld, and this definitely looks way more kid-friendly, which, if anything, I think this is highlighting a level of inconsistency that seems to stick around here. It's lost at this point, I think, between Shadowverse, and that they want their game to be kid-friendly, but they're also coming from a Japanese sentimentality where anime girl with big thighs and legs showing and is acceptable, and anime guy with barely even having a shirt on is acceptable. And here they're playing a completely different game in Mahjong, and here they're fishing. So yeah, feels like they're trying to expand quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if Shadowverse is actually fairly popular in Japan, and we eventually do find that Shadowverse is a real good candidate to be the next collectible card game, if there is going to be a next collectible card game. It's really difficult to maintain those levels of momentum though. Just watch the trailer. Yep. I believe Side Games is yet another one of these companies that either is owned by a Chinese Tencent type company or was acquired. See, all of those are the old characters there from Shadowverse, from the first Shadowverse game. Now, what this might be a case is that they've got a new artist in here, and so they wanted to make a new game to just focus on new characters, which would make some sense. It's a fairly old game, it would make sense to do that. And of the hero classes, there was many alternate skins you could have for many different other characters. This might also just be a case of them trying to modernize their app. I'm gonna lose, so might as well let the timer run down on Yu-Gi-Oh! But yeah, there's clearly a lack of interest in the actual Shadowverse part here. And they've got RPG elements and Mahjong and fishing, and Shadowverse is just being added to that. Now the Shadowverse universe already had multiple universes anyway, so a new set of people, a new set of heroes from a different universe makes sense to some level. But I honestly do think that the real focus here is that they are trying to de-emphasize Shadowverse card battling, and they are trying to create some other product completely. And at some point, Shadowverse will be redefined as not a collectible card game, but instead a metaverse experience or an MMO experience. I think that's good enough for today. So we have probably plenty of time to just keep on playing, but it might actually get more difficult to continue up the ranks. I think ideally we still want to get as many gems as possible, so at least rank 19. And then we're making small bits of progress on these challenges, but also, even if we do all of this, we're only going to get a few thousand gems. Let's see, fusion summoning, link summoning. And we're making small bits of progress here. I guess the big question to answer here, though, instead of just talking about Shadowverse, is there something here that could convince me to go from Yu-Gi-Oh to back to Shadowverse? I don't think so. And there definitely is an argument to be made that Yu-Gi-Oh has done a very poor job of trying to maintain and be an interesting experience. They just really haven't done a good job with their solo stories. Although Shadowverse's visual novel solo stories go way longer, and they waste a ton of time, and they're just not that well written to be interesting. Shadowverse had more crossover events. Shadowverse had more interesting looking cards with the anime waifus on them, but they actually had a fairly boring gameplay mechanic, so it was even more repetitive than just playing the Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck I have over and over again. And there is at least room in Yu-Gi-Oh! That I could make a new deck and do something different. I think there are more events in Yu-Gi-Oh! But the main thing, and the main reason why I would go to Shadowverse is, frankly, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just more popular. And if anything, I would make an argument to quit playing card games altogether if I was going to make any argument in favor of just saving time. Which I guess the question is, what could I do for 30 minutes to an hour at the beginning of every stream to warm up otherwise? And what games would I potentially have dailies for that I would want to play otherwise? I definitely have given some thought to playing something like Memento Mori, which is a mostly automated game, for 30 minutes or so and just letting the game play itself. But it probably wouldn't be that interesting to most people to watch it. It really would just be like a screensaver playing in the case of Memento Mori. And I couldn't play the other two games that are adult games, Memento Mori not being an adult game, on my phone. I'm still playing those on my phone, but nothing really new to report there. And then Star Trek Lower Decks, I've completely done all of the main storylines, so there's no way I would plan to move over to that. Apparently it was the Doom's 30th anniversary, or Doom 30th anniversary. Not really enough fanfare, in my opinion. Doesn't even feel like there really was anything on sale. they've made this logo, but it's kind of hard to even see that this is a 3 and a 0 when you have the Doom guy in front of it. It's easier to see certainly here. But yeah, you would think that there would be a sale or giveaway or something. I saw this Doom spelled in snow with this red, I assumed it was candle wax, but maybe it's not. And I didn't even see the tiny little 30 candle here. And then I'm just now realizing this isn't snow as much as this is a cake. And these are little Doom guys on a cake. Yeah. I just thought somebody spelled Doom. Yeah, that is weird. And they're just like retweeting people who are saying happy 30th anniversary. Just random people here. But yeah, you'd think that there was a sale or something. id Software doing basically the same, although they aren't retweeting people. Like, at the very least, what you could do is give away the original Doom game. Like, that would be easy enough to give away. To say, hey, Doom 1 for its 30th anniversary, I'm giving it away to free to everybody. Or, you know what would be really amazing is if they open sourced Doom 1 and public, or made it public domain. That would be crazy. Anyways, we have a video games chronicle here. A Florida man claims that a Joker-like character from GTA 6 trailer is based on his likeness. Florida Joker ain't having that. Is the quote here, I guess. Although I question if that's really a quote. There definitely were some side-by-side comparisons of Florida people who clearly are being parodied or traced. Unfortunately for this Florida man and all of these people who are being parodied, traced, or mocked and ridiculed, it's already been settled in one court case with a powerful, rich celebrity who had lawyers that unless they named the guy the same name, the likeness alone, similarity in likeness alone, does not constitute a incursion into someone's small rights as far as their own appearance, which is very, very small and only usually protected if you are a celebrity in the first place, which I don't think this guy is. But yeah, there's really no story here. Almost certainly a Florida man with tattoos all over his face who was on the news became somewhat public, somewhat of a public celebrity and lost any privacy he might expect. Like, at a certain level, that would be the argument you would try to make in court if you were going to try and sue him, Rockstar, is you would say, I'm actually a private citizen and you got this picture of me off of the Florida's mugshot records, which has led to ridicule and slanders or liability of some level. Yeah, you probably get them on slander and liability more than you could you took my likeness, which is what the one thing the celebrity with a lot of money and lawyers couldn't do is say, well, I was a private citizen and thus I have a right to privacy. Moving on. They want you to link up your Epic Games Store to your Lego account, and then you can get this Lego minifig skin of this character, who I have no idea who this character is, but it is a pretty good comparison here as far as what I think they're trying to do here, which is you've got this minifig of a torso that is just a little torn here, showing just muscle marks, versus this lady who has a torn tear that is much higher and has a scar here and a scar here and not really so much muscle marks. They've also put this torso so that the pants are fairly high up to show less of it, and then hyper realistic or somewhat soft cell CGI realistic style here on the character design, versus just what you would get in a Lego minifig, which is just a generic minifig head and hat and arms and things of the like. I'm still a little surprised that Lego was okay with this idea. But then I feel like Lego really is, at this point, selling out completely. They've marked up the price of their Lego sets as high as they can go, and it's still not enough for them, so now they're increasingly selling Lego minifigs and that mentality as a license, while also paying for licenses to sell Sonic and Mario style Lego sets, which inherently, when Lego has to pay Nintendo or Sega for the likeness of Mario or Sonic, they're making less for the Lego sets than they would like anyways. I think that has been kind of the problem with a lot of Lego ventures in the past, is that they've never really made as much money as they'd wanted to make. I don't know what you can really do to fix that either. One thing they probably could do is get much further away from the collectors and the speculation market and resell a lot of older sets. Because if all of a sudden they don't have to rethink of a new instruction booklet and a new build, and they can just sell some old builds, which they've done that for a couple of things but not much, that would probably work fairly well. Although I think there is definitely a case where they're making as many Lego pieces as they can, so it's not really a case that they can make more sets and get more sets on the shelves at stores. They're severely suffering, like most toy manufacturers, but Lego in particular is suffering because their toys are too expensive to be on the shelf. But with there not really being a Toys R Us or a toy stores anymore, you can't have giant Toys R Us style aisles of a variety of Lego sets, which is really what they need. So at a certain point it would kind of make sense for there to be more Lego stores all around the world, and there's a decent amount of them, but not in every city. I guess if I was in charge of Lego, I would probably try to sign some deal with like Best Buy and have some sets on the shelf. Not, well, Best Buy would work too, but actually GameStop would make a lot more sense. Turn half of the GameStop's stores into toy stores, Lego stores. That might work fairly well. Moving on, we have a GameDeveloper.com article here saying Archetype's Exodus is being built as a Wizards of the Coast next big franchise. The Dungeons & Dragons publisher wants Archetype Entertainment sci-fi RPG to give it a new foothold in a genre it has had minimal success in. Inherently, though, I have such a bias against Wizards of the Coast, and I think they've earned it. And I think most people would probably say they've earned it, that even if this Archetype video game was super successful, I feel like Wizards and their parent company Hasbro would just ruin it and drive it into the ground one way or the other. Now noticeably, I just talked about for several minutes how Lego is suffering, and I'm fairly sympathetic to Lego as a company since I like Lego sets. Whereas Hasbro, as a toy company, is also suffering and failing, I hope. And I would not care one bit if they go completely bankrupt. A lot of that has to do with the fact that almost every Hasbro board game is way overpriced these days, probably should be public domain by these points, and aren't that fun. So, like, Clue is probably the one board game I even slightly like of all the Hasbro board games. And yeah, if Hasbro went out of business and then Clue board games couldn't be purchased, it wouldn't even be a big loss. And yeah, Monopoly is the biggest, most popular one, generally speaking, and there's probably more than enough Monopoly games in the world already. So yeah, for all I really care, Hasbro could go bankrupt tomorrow, and I really wouldn't care much about it. I would probably want to see somebody like Microsoft or even maybe EA, although EA would put a bunch of microtransactions in it, gobble up the licenses of Hasbro and make better digital versions of those games. Inherently, I guess that is worth pointing out here, is that if Archetype is hugely successful as a video game, it'll be in direct contrast to what would have been the experience for almost any other Hasbro video game, Hasbro based board video game. Let's see, there's something about the Godot engine. They talked about their 1 year anniversary. Yeah, as far as the Godot engine foundation being 1 year old. Well, now, after a year, they've introduced a forum, which for a programming engine, yeah, probably should have had a forum from the beginning. I could be generous and assume that they were going through something like GitHub that would have handled forum posts of sorts, although that's not exactly what GitHub is about. It's not about just generally posting things, even though you kind of can do that. It's more about posting things directly related to the programming aspect in the version of the Godot engine. And then I talked about this game, this sign language musical adventure game, Harmonium the Musical, being announced for the Xbox One and Series and PC, iOS, and Android, but somehow I missed it in the last stream. Yeah, and as it goes, I just feel like the concept potentially is going to be somewhat offensive in that you have this character that is deaf and uses sign language, which I'm kind of fine, and I wish I saw slightly more people in video games that were deaf and use sign language, or just slightly deaf. Although noticeably the last person that was deaf in a video game was the Silent Man, or whatever the name of that awful game was. But then to take that concept and then put her in this fantastical world where she has this love for music that, I mean, you're just not really gonna properly engage with if you're deaf. There are some people that have gone deaf, drummers in particular, who have gone deaf throughout their career, and they can feel the low beat. But yeah, it's just not realistic or kind to make a game or a story like this. Where she's a drumming person. If you did this in the real world, it would be very close to abusive. The idea of encouraging a kid who is deaf to the point where they have to sign completely. Encouraging them to do musical activities is crazy. I guess inherently she's also mute because she's signing. I can also tell you that looking at this trailer, definitely doesn't feel like you'd be learning sign language. And I assume in the video game they're going to take it to the next extreme of insulting and probably have music playing throughout the whole time, so you're not even really going to have a sympathetic experience here. I mean, there is a real danger here that this game is going to be the next step in going way too far as trying to be that SJW accessible that video game developers are pushing, while completely not really understanding the situation or really doing anything helpful. Which we've already gotten pretty extreme in that games are literally getting praise and awards for putting in a sign language interpreter into their game when the game already has subtitles, which it makes no sense at all that you would be playing a mature game, which it was a mature game, and that you would be unable to read. Unless you can make some kind of argument that I've never heard that sign language or people signing somehow don't would help people with like dyslexia or something, people that couldn't read but were of the right age that they should be able to read. But yeah, if you're deaf and you're dyslexic, you're probably just screwed at that point in life in general. It's ridiculous to add that extra feature to a video game, which has to sell quite a bit. Inherently, this feels like a game that people are going to heavily imply that you're ableist if you don't like it, if you don't play it, and then probably it's going to be a fairly short game. Notably, in all these screenshots, while they look pretty, I'm not really seeing anything here that looks like a actual gameplay mechanic. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you really are just pressing QTEs going through an animated sequence. This is also from Netflix, so so this may be a game that is being published by Netflix. This may be a game that's specifically been designed to play on a Netflix TV, so you would have just a minimum number of buttons, and that's part of the thing here. I wouldn't be surprised if you are just prompted to press up and down, left and right every now and then. Alright. Let me see if I can pull up the games from Friday. That was something I didn't fully prepare for. So I guess it is a question as far as, should I talk about the news or should I look at games that are new, then talk about the news? Well, anyways, these are the games I think I picked as far as Friday that I wanted to somewhat highlight, although in all fairness, really don't have too much to say about these. Actually, I think this one I can say no to. There is, I imagine, going to be a scenario here where just by looking at the games twice, I will start to be a little bit more critical and start to take more games, even from the curated list, off. This one I probably should say no to, but at least they are making a 3D puzzle here that visually seems well done. But yeah, definitely doesn't feel like there's as big of a need to figure out what these games are or try and really describe them as I'm highlighting them, so this really will just turn into a slideshow as far as saying here's the games. Obviously some of these are visual novels, some of these are puzzle games, some of these are horror games. Obviously there was a lot more games that looked like absolute garbage. And so yeah, things definitely have changed here. Here's a game that's already mixed. Because now I'm basically highlighting a significant percentage that has been curated of games. It's a small percentage, perhaps insignificant percentage might be the one before. This game here looks really good, but it's overwhelmingly negative and 19%. If I saw that at least one YouTuber covered this, but I didn't watch a video. Horrible games devs took advantage of us. They are no longer backing the project. Game is shutting down. Do not buy. Scam. Studio shut down 3 days after the release of OMEGO. Scam of the year. Scam. So people are really unhappy with this early access game. Which, yeah, I don't think there really is a great way to gracefully exit if a project fails. Your best bet is to, if you actually care about your name as a developer and publisher, is to probably refund everybody, or at least offer refunds to anybody who wants it. Try to be as earnest and honest as possible. Don't try to make an MMO in the first place. Yeah, visually these screenshots look good, which probably got a lot of people buying the game. Now it's not going anywhere. Speaking of scams, which is perhaps not legally advisable a phrase to use, the completionist, Super Beard Bro, whatever he calls himself, did finally put out a response to the accusations being made against him from about 3 YouTubers, at least, probably a lot more, in that people had donated to his charity, and then his charity has been sitting on the money for way too long, years and years. In his response, which was about 15 minutes, he spent the first 3 minutes or so describing how the charity was started after his mother died of the disease the charity supports, going for the sad sympathy angle, which somewhat worked. But by the end of the 15 minutes or so video, he was angrily threatening to sue. If he was all but angrily threatening to sue, and he was implying he was going to sue the YouTubers who brought to light the fact that his YouTube, his charity hadn't donated the money. In the meantime, in between those two steps, after the first 1.5 to 3 minutes of describing his matter, he effectively admitted that the charity had not donated the money. That his charity was one of these charities like many, designed to only donate to other charities, and they had just been sitting on the money. So, I mean, it definitely felt like he just kind of admitted the main accusation made against him. Now, some of the rest of the time he spent nitpicking, frankly, the details. This is after the completionist also took a long time to respond, either because he was getting lawyers to write up a response for him or what. I don't know, but he definitely didn't immediately respond to that. It definitely felt like this was a case of some PR company helped him plan a response. Didn't feel off the cuff. But yeah, he definitely was just kind of nitpicking the details of accusations, and some of the YouTubers definitely are digging for gold and sometimes getting false gold, fool's gold, as far as, oh, they were filed as one kind of charity in the tax forms, and then they were filed as a different kind of charity in another tax forms, and that's why public tax forms aren't lining up with the way they seem like they should, or that there is actually several charities from the completionist family, and so there's been a full system here where the family started several charities, and the golf tournament was effectively his father's golf tournament, which I think this probably implies that his family is super rich, and that they're running charities, making multiple charities amongst their family, and having golf tournaments. Because certainly most people, if your father said, I'm starting a charity and the golf tournament, you would never hear that. That would be a laughable idea, let alone another family member also making a charity. I'm frankly a little surprised he didn't actually try to use G4 as a reference too, and claim he would have never been hired by G4 if there was some impropriety going on. But in all fairness, G4, had they done any kind of due diligence on who they hired for the G4 reboot, they would have shown that there would have been a lot more scrutiny put on a lot of the people. But yeah, even in his own response, in trying to sugarcoat it as much as possible, I feel like the completionist basically admitted guilt to the main thing people were upset about, which is that he was doing seemingly entire charities events, collecting the money, and then not donating any of that money, and then doing another charity event. And I think that is the main thing that would cross the line for practically anyone, is if you're literally collecting money, sitting on it for 6 months to a year, and then having yet another charity event. Or, I mean, even if you had 2 charity events in a row, there's a general expectation that the money would be given, donated. Now, in fairness, I wouldn't be surprised if similar things happen in other charities all the time, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of the Games Done Quick things also have somewhat of that problem. Inherently, Gerard the Completionist feels like he's a guy you would like to like. I think he works very hard to give off that persona of somebody you would like to like. But I think underlining that, there is a super large desire to be successful and popular. I think there's that bloodlust that is in most celebrities, and in that comes, I think, a personality that is common amongst celebrities, in that they would stab anyone in the back or betray anybody the second they feel like they've been crossed. I think he is Hollywood through and through. Jeff Lewis is probably a great example of somebody like that too, from the Flipping Out TV series. Like, just burning through people, super narcissistic, super thirsty to be amongst celebrities, to be around celebrities. But yeah, I don't think he's really a good person in my book, in my own personal opinion. And yeah, I kind of like the idea in general of his YouTube channel, but he actually just doesn't make that much content. And a lot of the videos that I tried to watch of the Completionist came off as very repetitive, where he was just making the exact same jokes over and over again. And then he certainly jumped a shark, in my opinion, when he just said, I'm going to replay the first 100 games to 100% completion that I've already done. As somebody who plays games and often tries to complete them, usually I play video games, not recently, I don't see the purpose in that, particularly when you're making YouTube content. There's plenty of other games to play, new games to try out and play. And yeah, I just don't think that was a smart move at all. Anyways, moving on. We have the charts still. Not really telling me much, but it does feel like we're seeing some major increases in the number of players now. We have over 1 million players on Counter-Strike Go. I think that's 600,000 players on Dota 2. Then big drops down to 300 players for Apex Legends, Naraka, Blade Point, GTA 5. I wonder how much of this player base goes up because of the day of the week, the season, or how much of this goes up because of the Game Awards. Which, rightfully, I think the Game Awards is getting a lot of criticism, and I hope they kind of hear that and move away from the style that they've done in the past couple of years, because this last Game Awards really pushed it too far and became very egregious around not really allowing acceptance speeches or allowing very short acceptance speeches for winners of awards in favor of showing a lot of trailers and advertisements for new games, and then having Kojima on the stage promote things for far too long. Which that's the main complaint, is Kojima was given 10 minutes and then one acceptance speech was given like 30 seconds. And in all fairness, several categories weren't even allowed on the stage to receive an award and were just named as award winners. Which there is definitely some weirdness there. It would be very weird if the Oscars were showing trailers for brand new movies in the middle of giving awards out for movies that came out already. On the lower end, we're still seeing about the top 14 or 15 having 100,000 players, which honestly I question if maybe I should be looking closer down to the 100 end. These would be the games that potentially would change and be more informative. Binding of Isaac Rebirth potentially still doing good. Fallout 4 even doing good. Yep, there definitely is room for me to revamp my macro and scan all 100 of these games every time I scan it, every couple days, to get a better chart that shows what has changed per se. Which honestly, the changes are probably more informative than the actual numbers. Yeah, right now the chart is really just telling me that like GTA has gotten a big resurgence, Baldur's Gate 3 has gotten a big resurgence, and the finals have gotten a big. But yeah, really what would be more helpful is to know that one game has lost 100,000 players in a couple days and see the changes up and down, which is kind of what this is supposed to show, but really doesn't work that well. There is, I guess, something informative to see here, in that here's the finals right now, and here was the peak of the finals playtest a few weeks ago, about a month ago actually. So the playtest still has not been beaten as far as the released version. And the Steam VR Fest is still going on. And apparently I'm not signed in. Or it doesn't think I'm signed in. Yeah, I guess it really did sign me out. Oh well. I'll have to remember to deal with that later. As far as other video game Chronicles news, Alan Wake 2's Old Gods of Asgard entered the global top 10 following their Game Awards performance. The fictional band are actually a Finnish band, Poets of the Fall, which, okay. Getting to the global top 10 on some list in the music industry these days is probably pretty easy. Lego Fortnite is seeing higher player counts than Fortnite Battle Royale. I assume it is just all the same launcher. Apparently Black Friday broke the UK's game retail records. The retail event was only surpassed by the 2020 and 2013 Black Fridays, both of which were console launch years. I definitely question what the next console launch will be like. Effectively, I guess Microsoft and Sony can wait a little bit, but they can't wait that long. I wouldn't say another 3 years is really that feasible, but they can at least wait 1 year to see if the next Nintendo console sells well or not. But particularly for PlayStation, I could see PlayStation coming out with the argument is that a PlayStation 5 Pro might come out sometime next year or the year after that. But yeah, if they were to come out with a PlayStation 6, I'm not sure what they really would offer as improvements. Then Xbox could come out early and try and beat them, or they could just wait. I think all the consoles basically could just wait, though. There's not enough money and there's not enough technology improvements that have really happened in the meantime. We already talked about this story. Assassin's Creed Mirage is getting a new game plus next week, and a permadeath mode has been delayed. Now expected to arrive early in 2024. That's crazy because I swear the permadeath mode would be so easy to program, but the new game plus mode would take way more time to program. Permadeath is fairly easy. You just add a line of code that says you can't respawn, a game over screen, and that's it. Like, that should be very, very easy to program. So it's very odd that that mode's getting delayed, other than the fact that maybe the permadeath mode doesn't really add much to the game, whereas a new game plus does actually add a lot to the game. And it does make some sense to not release both modes at the same time, because you really are splitting your player base between people who would want to continue to play the game all over again and people who would want to play the game until they died, or think they're so good at the game at this point that they won't die. Still don't care about their podcast. The Case of the Golden Idol is getting a sequel set in the 1970s. The detective game will be released next year for PC, consoles, and mobile via Netflix. But I don't even know what this Case of the Golden Idol is as a game. I don't feel like I've even ever seen it before. Anyways, that brings us to the Gematsu articles. Which, yeah. Partly because of the season, partly because it was a weekend, there's really not that many Gematsu articles either. Terra Nil is coming to the Switch on December 18th. Metaphor ReFantasio details settings, tribes, prologue, and unique gameplay mechanics. Now, one thing that is interesting here, this feels like this is also from Cygames. Because I'm not looking at the games, all the games that are coming out on Steam as of today, and I'm doing that off screen and then showing a curated selection of this. No, this is Atlas. Not side games. Because of that, it does open the door that I can take really as much time as I would like and not really have to feel rushed. But yeah, also it's definitely a case that if there isn't really that much to say, there isn't that much to say. So we may be down to a 2-hour stream, which will only help my channel, frankly, and YouTube in general. Is the less time it takes me to stream, the better, unless I have some actual important stuff to say or show. Even at that, important stuff to say and show should be done in more streams of fewer duration. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms 8 remake has been delayed to a general 2024. Let's see. This week's Japanese game releases: Custom Mech Wars, whatever this game is called. Let's see. Atlas Fallen, Cosmic Fantasy Collection, Custom Mech Wars, Frontline First Remake, Gone, Koumajo Remila 2, Stranger's Requiem, Taito LD Game Collection, Trigger Heart Excelia, and Under the Waves. I don't feel like any of those games are actually Western games. Do you have a interestingly larger than what we've seen in the past few weeks number of digital games, although I'm also noticing that some of these are digitally released on Xbox only because they've already been released on everything else. Shadowverse Worlds Beyond being announced. We already talked about that. I don't think there's anything more I can really say about it now. Yeah. Let's click on side games and let's see. Side games apparently also does Grand Blue Fantasy and Lil Noah Scion of Paradise. Really? I don't think Side Games was publishing Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. See how far we have to actually go back to see the other Shadowverse game mentioned. Side Games established a Side Games America and Side Games Europe 7 months ago. Maybe they are trying to be the new Tencent, and maybe they weren't acquired by somebody. Thought they might have been, but I guess I could be wrong. Grand Blue Fest. Yeah, it definitely feels like they're trying to take this little Noah Scion of Paradise concept and put it in Shadowverse. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus definitely getting way more attention from Komatsu though. Probably rightfully so. There you go. So 2 years ago, this was the anime that they came out with in the more kid-friendly Shadowverse concept that they tried to promote. But you have a whole group of kids basically just like Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime playing Shadowverse, the exact same Shadowverse card game. with their schoolmates. And yeah, I don't think that really worked. I don't think the anime went anywhere. And it definitely came off as very weird because you still had the characters from Shadowverse and the card art from Shadowverse just squished into a completely different world. Really felt like they were just trying to make this so they could sell it on the Switch, and I don't know if it really did sell on the Switch at all. They even have a dual disc equivalent, so that they were heavily ripping off Yu-Gi-Oh! Or trying to rip off Yu-Gi-Oh! Trying to be perhaps even a little bit more kid-friendly than the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime series. But yeah, I don't think it succeeded, and I don't think this new one has a great chance of succeeding either. We'll see. The real question, I guess, would be, are they going to shut down the original Shadowverse and force all the people to play the new Shadowverse? Which, yeah, I could see that happening. Apparently a platform fighting game called Combo Devils has been announced for PC. Let's see what Steam has to say with that. Okay. Is that what we're calling Smash Brothers clones at this point? Platform combo fighting games? I mean, it's a generic name, but it isn't the worst concept of a name. I think you probably would want to combine the words Playco fighting. I don't know how you would mix that together. Play, fight, co. Play fighting game kind of would make sense though. It was PLA, then fight. It's the first time I've ever heard that phrase though, and I don't know if it's going to catch on. And then Genshin Impact version 4.3 update Roses and Muskets launches December 20th. It's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com articles. Tinder Clause forms a new collective agreement with a worker-led union. The Tinder Clause Human Union's new contract with its company has secured pay and job structure transparency along with greater benefits for LGBTQIA staff. I guess they're saying this is a worker-led union as compared to a union not being worker-led. I guess perhaps there is some cases here. Yeah, no, this is CWA, and if the Communication Workers of America do have some kind of special main office that is not run by workers in a union shop somewhere, it's probably very small if such a thing actually exists. Otherwise, I'd say almost all unions, or at least almost every part of every union, is worker-led, so it's a funny phrase to use. Other than instead of just saying CWA, which you could also say, or definitely seems like CWA is also winning the fight to unionize the video game industry under its banner for the places it is actually succeeding to unionize versus some other union coming in, which I wouldn't be surprised if the Screen Actors Guild tried to form some unions if they actually cared for video game voice actors. and expand on that level. But yeah, so far it definitely is starting to look like CWA is the only game in town, which is probably good for a union, because it means if all the CWA union workers that went on strike, they would go on strike from multiple different video game companies, potentially, and have more of an impact. Whereas if your industry is split between 3 different unions and one of the 3 unions decides to strike, that's less impactful and less powerful. We already talked about the Brothers, Tales of Two Sons, and Archetype Exodus. Apparently, Suicide Squad is getting an offline mode post-release. And then Screen Queensland backs local developers with expanded games grants. Which... okay. I'll leave it at that, I guess. I'm starting to get a little sleepy here. I'm getting very lucky that this didn't go longer than I thought it was going to. And then we'd already talked about some of these stories as far as Microsoft incorporating some of the contract workers into the ZeniMax union, offering some full-time roles. And then we already talked about the Game Awards and its sidelining of developers in favor of reveal celebrities and a one big Muppet. Wouldn't even call that a big Muppet, but whatever. And then Yinglet's developer Triple Tapping is closing its doors after declaring bankruptcy. And so yeah, the fall list cleanup now is never going to be talked about or touched on. And the new games on Steam are only going to be shown curated. And for a few weeks here, while I'm working on my Smarter on Air sign more, I won't be looking at any adult games. And I still don't really have a way to even really mention adult games other than to say, maybe I saw a really good one. It's called Beep Beep, and I may literally have to just beep myself as far as the titles of the games, depending on what the name of the game is, due to YouTube censorship rules. There were some articles because it messed up. Again, it's like every time my macro runs now, it messes up some way. And always a different way, but some way. Modern Warfare 3 sales in the UK are down 38% compared to last year's Modern Warfare 2. And then we already talked about Epic saying the new LEGO racing modes are here to stay. And then Free Radical's closure has been confirmed as the Time Splitters developers bemoan a quote broken industry. This is an Embracer-owned studio closed its website. It says 404 company not found, frowny face. Which, yeah. I guess this is all of them being shut down. Although, in fairness, if Embracer Group had acquired companies and kept everybody under a tighter belt, I don't think they should be affording a whole run of sweaters and Santa hats to have everybody take these photos. Even if they bought one sweater and then composited everybody into this picture, that's still kind of ridiculous. And yeah. Well, it definitely sucks to see people lose their job, and it sucks to see companies shut down. Inherently, Embracer companies were not doing enough to produce games and release games, nor was Embracer as a larger entity giving them enough time to produce games and release games. So it really just feels like bad management all around, and I'll really just have to leave it at that. Also, Baldur's Gate 3 players have been advised to manually update their Xboxes to combat disappearing saves. Larian says it's aware of saves being lost following crashes, which there really is just no reason whatsoever that should happen in modern days. It should be part of the API of saving and writing a file on any console, that the files always make shadow copies in the Microsoft terms, or snapshots in other terms, if you want to use that terminology, enough that if you write a save file and it's corrupted, it would be detected as corrupted and it would just restore the previous save file. And in fact, it really should be a case where every single game should allow you to have multiple saves anyways, and you should be able to roll back on those saves for pretty much any game you want to play. I think it's past the point where that should be a artistic intent option, and it really should just be mandatory for all games. Apparently, the Red Dead Redemption 2 star tells the Florida Joker to use the GTA 6 notoriety instead of complaining. The Florida man is claiming he owes him up to $2 million for the alleged use of his likeness. Which, yeah, if anything, if a lawsuit really happens, it'll almost certainly just once again confirm that Rockstar can get away with using anybody's likeness if they want to. Which is probably the right decision, just for free speech reasons. But yeah, inherently, the way the law is interpreted, assuming it is interpreted correctly in the United States, which it often isn't, in my opinion, but the Constitution is thought to be a linear list. So the First Amendment is more important than the Second Amendment, is more important than the Third, is more important than the Fourth, 15th, 16th. Whatever was added at the end is the least important. Now, if anybody made a new constitutional amendment to the Constitution, they can potentially rewrite something. So First Amendment's freedom of speech, they could potentially rewrite it to say freedom of speech and expression in multitude of forms. Or arguably they could rewrite it to say freedom of speech is no longer in the Constitution, which there really is nothing stopping the Congress and Senate from making a amendment to the Constitution that says something like that. They could effectively strip all the rights guaranteed in the Constitution away. Arguably, they might even have the right to fully dissolve the Constitution and as such fully dissolve the United States if they so chose. I don't know why they would do either one of those things, but whatever. But the right to privacy is implied, or has been interpreted by the lawyers as I understand it, from it's been implied as I believe, Fourth Amendment is the unlawful search and seizure. Amendment. So the right to privacy is somewhere thought to be a Fourth Amendment thing. And as such, if it is thought to be a Fourth Amendment thing, right, then the right to free speech and parody somebody would be a First Amendment thing. And so, First Amendment would trump Fourth Amendment right to privacy in many, many cases, perhaps not all. I don't think it extends to the full idea of naming and writing a fake autobiography of somebody. If you hated somebody, I don't think you could write slanderous or libelous things about them if they are a private figure. But you could parody them, certainly, and write slanderous and libelous things about the parody and get away with it, more than likely. Anyways, moving on. We need to wrap up quickly before I fall asleep. Google revealed the 10 most searched games in 2023, which this again feels like one of those cases where 2023 is not really over, but I guess as far as anybody's concerned it is. So the top 10 games were Hogwarts Legacy, which noticeably I don't think got any nominations, or if they did get any nominations, they didn't get any awards when they probably deserved something. Plus, if you were going to do the Game Awards and make it a bigger deal around giving away awards, it wouldn't be that crazy to have a bunch of Harry Potter fans on stage in Harry Potter wizard robes with staffs. I could see having the orchestra dress up as Harry Potter characters. I could see bringing in a bunch of kids from the video game development world and having them come up on stage in their Harry Potter robes. Perhaps you have them sing something like "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" or something that they all would know off the top of their head. Last of Us, I don't know why it would have been Googled in 2023. Connections, I have no idea what that game even is. Battlegrounds Mobile India, seems to be uniquely an Indian search. Starfield, Baldur's Gate 3, and then something here that's not even in English, taking the list, and Diablo 4, Atomic Heart, and Sons of the Forest. The mobile game called Suikia. So apparently this mobile game, Suikia, is very popular in Japan. Well, I haven't heard of it, and it obviously doesn't have an English translation. Apparently, Hideo Kojima appears to have hidden a Silent Hill message into his OD trailer. Kojima was working on Silent Hills with an S until it was cancelled. So there's a little A here and what looks like might be footprints, and I guess that's supposed to be some kind of hint. Or I thought it maybe was a case that this character was mouthing words. Let's see. Well, Kier was talking to the camera. Faint letters appear in the mouth during 5 separate frames, which can be seen easier if the video's brightness levels are adjusted. We've done it in the header image of this article where you can see the letter A. Okay. In the order the letters spell out Atami, which is a Japanese city located in the Shizuoka Prefecture. The kanji of Shizuoka is this, and when separated into individual kanji, this means calm and quiet and silent, and this means hill. So the city's name could be broken down to Silent Hill. Okay, whatever. It really means nothing at all. And I don't know why you would even care to highlight or promote Silent Hill unless he is desperate to get people's attention, which we know he is. I think it's probably pretty easy to forget how much he leaned on Silent Hill to promote Death Stranding also. And it very much was a bait and switch situation with Death Stranding, in that there were people who thought Death Stranding was going to be a Silent Hill style horror game almost completely up to the point it was released. And then you were given a game that's not really that horrific, and that is actually pretty poor in my outside observation. I wouldn't be surprised if OD is very similar in that case, and that it is fairly disappointing. And then Sega wants the classic franchise reboots to show, quote, edginess and a rebellious mindset, although a rebellious mindset is definitely something that is said by somebody who has no edginess or a rebellious mindset. And this really feels like this is a 70-year-old president of Japan, or a CEO of Japan, talking, instead of a enthusiastic game developer from a younger generation in Japan. Yep. I don't know if they're really gonna come out with a game that actually feels relatable or true, or if it isn't going to really come off as pandering. There is something in this screenshot that also I notice here. I'm pretty sure in the original Jet Set Radio you had a spray painter and grinder in a sci-fi world where there's a bunch of police, whereas this looks like this is just a skater who is skating in a modern city. Like, I'm not seeing any spray painting, I'm not seeing any police, I'm not seeing anything here that feels authoritarian or repressive in any way. You see these other characters in the background, and they look like they're colorfully dressed and able to express their individuality. You look at the backgrounds of the posters in the city, it all is colorful and expressing individuality. It's hard to be a rebel when there's not much to rebel against. Yeah, so that they may have already dropped the ball somewhat there. Yeah, and I guess that's gonna be that. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.